You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or a contribution. And thank you for those of you who are sending in cards. We really appreciate it. And they are getting through at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for December 17th, 2024. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where our attitude towards Republican voters is very simple.
I could peel you like a pear, and God himself would call it justice.
It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Bluegal. Hey, Bluegal.
Yeah, and a shout out to our Canadian listeners as well. Your postal strike is over.
Mm-hmm.
Go Canadian postal unions.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Look, it is a month before his inauguration, and Trump's already making clear he's going to screw his most loyal stooges.
Yeah.
Because it's all a grift. This is from The Atlantic. Quote, Trump is about to betray his rural supporters. Small-town America voted heavily in his favor, but the policies he pledged won't reward that faith. Agricultural producers could face worse losses than any other economic sector from Trump's plans to impose sweeping tariffs on imports and to undertake what he frequently has called the largest domestic deportation operation of undocumented immigrants in American history. Hospitals and other health providers in rural areas could face the greatest strain from proposals Trump has embraced to slash spending on Medicaid, which provides coverage to a greater share of adults in smaller communities than in large metropolitan areas. And small-town public schools would likely be destabilized even more than urban school districts if Trump succeeds in his pledge to expand school choice by providing parents with vouchers to send their kids to private schools. Rural areas would be especially vulnerable to cuts anywhere near the level that Republicans are discussing. Rural residents tend to be older and poorer and face more chronic health problems. Rural employers are less likely to offer health insurance, which means that Medicaid provides coverage for a larger share of working-age adults in small towns. Multiple studies have found that about a fifth, that's 20%, of rural residents rely on Medicaid, compared with less than a sixth in urban areas. Nearly half of all children in rural areas receive health coverage through the Federal Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP, launched during Bill Clinton's presidency, unquote.
Mm-hmm.
I would also add that in 2018, Medicaid covered about 50% of births in rural areas compared to 43% of births nationwide. Rural residents are also more likely to be covered by Medicaid at birth than those in urban areas. Why do Republicans hate babies so much?
We don't know, Bluegal. They just hate. They have so many different groups they hate.
Yeah.
You know, babies are just one more. By the way, if you think the housing shortage is going to be solved by deporting millions of construction workers who are also immigrants, who are undocumented, oh, you haven't seen anything yet. It's going to be so much worse when you're looking for a house. And we're going to be out there with our little sandwich boards reminding everyone that
you voted for this.
This is what you voted for, buddy. This is what you asked for. Now, remember how Trump got the evangelicals and all those other smooth-brained morons up off the couch into the polls by relentlessly lying about trans people and how school nurses are apparently performing sex change operations on children during story time? Yeah, that ad was played 1 million times. Beat that shit into the ground. And that was one of the largest wedge issues that Trump hammered over and over again that got him elected.
It did.
Got him elected.
People remembered that ad.
Hating trans people and all the terrible things they're doing to our country was one of the main reasons Trump got elected. Well, this is from NBC this week. Quote, Trump downplays transgender bathroom debate as the issue rips through Congress. In an interview with Time magazine, the president-elect also appeared uncommitted on rolling back anti-discrimination protections for LGBTQ students. Now, I think he's going to do it because he's a lying scumbag, but he doesn't want to take any heat for it now, so now he's just going to reverse himself and lie because he's already won. President-elect Donald Trump said Thursday that he agrees with incoming Representative Sarah McBride, who is set to become the first transgender member of Congress, that lawmakers should focus on more important issues than which bathrooms transgender people should be allowed to use. He's looking at you, Nancy Mace. He's waving his big orange paws at you, Nancy Mace. Prior to saying he agreed with McBride, Trump declined to answer a question about whether he more broadly believes transgender people should be allowed to use the restrooms of their choosing. Currently, 14 states have some form of legal limitations on which bathroom transgender people can use, according to the LGBTQ think tank Movement Advance Project. I don't want to get into the bathroom issue, Trump told Time, because I've already used it up and now I'm moving on.
Right.
Because it's a very small number of people we're talking about, and it's ripped apart our country, and so they'll have to settle whatever the law finally agrees.
I want you to read that last phrase again. So they'll have to.
So they, whoever they are, because I'm just a bystander here. So they'll have to settle whatever the law finally agrees. It's typical Trump double talk.
Yeah.
As if he's just a fucking bystander, had nothing to do with this issue. Remember, it's a very small number of people, and somehow, Bluegal, it ripped our country apart. How do you suppose that happened,
Yeah,
Bluegal?
whose fault was that?
Yeah.
You may also remember that the Trump campaign relentlessly blamed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris personally for high grocery prices during the 2024 campaign. We'll get them down, is what Trump told shoppers during a September visit to a Pennsylvania grocery store. In a speech in August in North Carolina, Trump told voters, "From the day I take the oath of office, we will rapidly drive prices down and make America affordable again. Prices will come down, you just watch," he continued. "They'll come down, and they'll come down fast. Not only with insurance, with everything." Here is Trump again.
It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
Oops, I'm sorry. That wasn't Trump in August promising the stupids that inflation will just miraculously disappear. That was Trump in 2020 promising the stupids that COVID-19 would just miraculously disappear. In fact, it was just one of the dozens of times Trump told the stupids that COVID would miraculously disappear. Back in October of 2020, CNN's Daniel Wolf and Daniel Dale compiled a list of the 38 times that Trump had made that claim to date. Quote, "It's going to disappear," a timeline of Trump's claims that COVID-19 will vanish. His proclamations have been wildly inaccurate. Yeah. That's an understatement.
Uh-huh.
When Trump first started making the claim in February, it was about the time the U.S. had just suffered its very first known COVID-19 death. More than 220,000 deaths later, Trump continues to falsely claim that the virus will somehow just go away, even as the U.S. experiences yet another surge in cases and hospitalizations, unquote.
Yeah, that's their superpower. Just complete brick wall denial of reality. That is who they are. They will just deny fucking reality and hate anyone who tries to make them see what's right in front of them. So, of course, this is all a lie. We knew it was a lie. You all out there in podcast land knew it was a lie. The Trump people knew it was a lie. The legacy media knew it was a lie. The only people who didn't know it was a lie were the stupids. And the stupids think there's a bunch of big red dials in the Oval Office, and one of them is marked inflation. And since presidents all have magic Green Lantern powers, all a president has to do to lower inflation is to turn the dial to lower inflation. And then it just magically happens. That's how things work in an economy. But because Joe Biden is old and infirm, and because Kamala Harris is a communist, they refuse to turn the dial to lower inflation. Instead, being evil, they turned the dial the other way to increase inflation. I think they might have cranked it up to 11, Bluegal. And then they and Hillary Clinton and AOC and Nancy Pelosi all got drunk and cackled and did the electric slide until dawn to celebrate screwing over the American people. At least that's what the stupids think. But Trump, he promised to crank that dial all the way down. So the stupids voted for him in record numbers. And here's from The Hill last week. Quote, "President-elect Trump said it will be, quote, very hard, unquote, to lower grocery prices now that they have risen. but he predicted they will come down. In a wide-ranging interview with Time magazine, Trump struck a more measured tone than he did on the campaign trail. Say measured tone one more time, motherfucker. Say it one more time. I dare you. I double dare you. But asked if his presidency would be a failure if food prices don't come down, Trump replied, I don't think so. I already won. I've already succeeded. Yeah. Fuck you. The lie worked. The stupids voted for me. Ha, 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 ha. Look.
He's doing the electric slide, Driftglass.
He is. Look, they got them up. You know, they got them up. They turned the dial up. And I'd like to bring them down. It's hard to bring things down once they're up. You know, it's very hard. But I think they will. I think that energy is going to bring them down. Yeah, drilling for more oil, even though we're still producing more oil than we ever have in history. And doing that a decade from now, when they're capable of doing it, will bring prices down immediately on eggs. Yeah. I think a better supply chain is going to bring them down, Trump said, noting, whoa, the supply chain is still broken, unquote.
Mass deportations are going to affect the supply chain, Donald.
Sure. They make it so much better. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm just wondering if the word groceries is the name of a porn star he banged in 2015.
Yeah.
You know, shorter Donald Trump. I don't know groceries at all. I never heard of them. You should ask Michael Cohen about groceries.
Groceries cost him $135,000. He doesn't want to explain why.
No.
And so
see my lawyer.
Yeah, see my lawyer. Oh, not that lawyer. I have another lawyer. I have a lot of lawyers. A couple of them are going to end up on the Supreme Court. A couple more of them are going to end up on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, congratulations.
And so once again, poor Daniel Dale, has been pressed back into service. This is from the Huffington Post about the non-press conference that Trump held down to Mar-a-Lago last week, or a couple days ago anyway. Quote, there was a lot of lying from Donald Trump during the press conference the president-elect gave at his Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach, Florida on Monday, said CNN fact-checking reporter Daniel Dale. But one comment stood out as particularly perilous. Dale told colleague Dana Bash, who apparently still has a job, and we don't know why Dana Bash still has a job, although we kind of do know why Dana Bash still has a job.
Yeah, I think we do.
I think the most dangerous part was an equivocation, said Dale. It wasn't really a claim, but he was asked whether he thought there was a link between vaccines and autism, and he equivocated. He said, well, we have some brilliant people looking at this, and he talked about the increased prevalence of autism diagnoses. Dale, though, spelled out his issue with Trump's comments. Look, there is no link between vaccines and autism. This notion has been discredited by study after study over decades. Dale continued, the idea that there is some connection came from a thoroughly discredited, in fact, scandalously, fraudulently altered study in the 1990s that should just be ignored, dismissed again because it was fraudulent. And so the idea that, well, we're just going to look into this, I think is dangerous to consider because the idea is simply wrong. Dale also called out Trump's misleading claims on tariffs and the effect they will have on Americans and the returning POTUS claim that there was zero inflation during his first term. Again, just lie after lie after lie after lie, and the stupids, I'm sure, sopped it up like gravy with a biscuit. Back to the article. Trump's assertion over and over that there were like no wars, period, in the world during his first term was also simply not true and a rewriting of history, Dale added, unquote. So, the question that we always ask here, and we always answer it for you because we let you do a full service thing, is why do MAGA bigots and imbeciles keep falling for this asshole's obvious lies, especially when they fall apart so fast? And the answer is because living in a state of complete denial of reality is what defines a MAGA voter. That's who they are. And feeding them lies, the lies that sustain them, is the very profitable business model of conservative media. Just as elevating the lies and capitulating to the liars is the increasingly less profitable business model of the legacy media.
Which brings us to ABC News. You've all undoubtedly already heard this story by now, but first, from the Times Are Tough All Over file, this is from Axios. Quote, top editors stiff the Washington Post. The situation at the Washington Post is so dire that two candidates to run the paper are Katz, Olive, and Bosco. No, I'm just kidding. Cliff Levy of the New York Times and Meta's Ann Kornblut, a former Post editor, both withdrew from consideration for the top newsroom job over the paper's strategy. Sources involved in the process say. Why it matters, because, Axios. The Post is scrambling to find a new executive editor.
Jesus Christ.
The chair once held by Ben Bradley amid shrinking paid readership and revenue. And we think that's fairly recent.
Yeah, and fairly obvious why.
Yeah. Publisher and CEO Will Lewis, handpicked by owner Jeff Bezos to save the Post, hasn't impressed the candidates with his vision for the future, the sources tell us, unquote.
Yeah.
Democracy dies in darkness, Driftglass.
Well, certainly something died somewhere. Because, and this is such it's such a staggering reversal that you have this top job in the media that the person who is scouting for candidates is like the last asshole at the bar begging anyone to go out with him.
Yeah.
And the answer is no, fuck you, no. No, we don't. You smell bad, and you're untrustworthy, and you're shifty, and I don't like where you plan to take me.
I never go to a third location with with who? What is his name again?
The CEO of
CEO
Will Lewis
of the Washington Post.
Yeah, never go to a secondary crime scene
with
the
Will
CEO
Lewis.
and it's now a seller's market. They can't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take the fucking job.
No,
I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole unless they promise to fire Will Lewis and start and tell Jeff Bezos to go fly rockets somewhere and let
fly
the
rockets
newspaper,
somewhere, and we'll get 10 grain.
Yeah,
and Batocchio.
Hell yeah, and Bluegal.
And Bluegal, and when we'll all sit around and call Donald Trump a fuckface.
Yeah,
for the first month.
And the Bradcast will be our radio arm. And we will have a liberal media, but until these people at the top are gone,
right,
and quit fiddling around with this as if it's just another toy in their toy box, this is going to keep going on. Now,
and I'm going to consider our executive board of the Washington Post a failure if Donald Trump doesn't sue us in the first 3 weeks.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, one of our big asks at the end of the Professional Left podcast in those circumstances, our fundraising thing is going to be for legal fees because we will have to hire an army of lawyers.
We really want Donald Trump to sue us.
We do. Once we are running the Washington Post, we'll definitely want to sue us.
That's the point.
On the regular.
I'll consider us an abject failure.
Yeah.
If in the first 15 days we don't have a lawsuit at our door.
I will run into your office, Bluegal, because we'll have our own offices, but they'll be next door to each other, and we'll be kissy at lunch. But running in there, going, "Why the fuck are we only number 17 on Kash Patel's enemy list? What the hell's going on here? What the hell?" Nixon told the Washington Post they couldn't come back to the White House, and there's that recording of him saying he doesn't want them on the grounds anymore.
Yeah, and don't tell Mrs. Nixon because she'll let him in. Right.
So we want that level of liberal media. Thank you very much. But we don't have that. Now, over at the LA Times, again, this is bad news, but it's actually good news. I take it as good news. Quote, LA Times columnist quits because of, quote, cowering, unquote, owners, quote, shameful capitulation to Trump. Former Los Angeles Times senior legal columnist Harry Litman, who you probably all know from MSNBC, blasted his ex-employer after its billionaire owner, Patrick Soon-Shiong, made a series of editorial decisions favorable to President-elect Donald Trump. That included spiking an endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris before last month's election. The move prompted some staffers to quit. Litman, a former federal prosecutor and frequent cable news guest, praised the editorial staff in a Substack post on Thursday and informed his readers his time at the publication is over. But I've written my last column for the Times. Yesterday, I resigned my position. I don't want to continue to work for a paper that is appeasing Trump and facilitating his assault on democratic rule for craven reasons, he wrote, unquote. Way to go, Harry. You can always come on this podcast and dog Trump all you want. You have an open invitation.
See, there are still people out there in the journalism world who have integrity, but none of those types were in evidence at ABC News this week.
No. We had to get back to ABC. Yes, we
did.
Mm-hmm.
This is from the New York fucking Times. Quote, ABC News is set to pay $15 million to settle a defamation lawsuit brought by Donald Trump. I want you to know the Professional Left podcast will not settle with Donald Trump for $15.
No.
The agreement was a significant concession by a major news organization and a rare victory for a media-bashing politician whose previous litigation efforts against news outlets have often ended in defeat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing that gets me, is they could have won this case.
Yeah, at a walk. They could have won this at a walk.
Cowardice. That's all it is just cowardice.
Well,
they don't want ABC News in the news. They don't want to be the story. That's how they put it.
Right.
Under the terms of a settlement revealed on Saturday, ABC News will donate the $15 million to Mr. Trump's future presidential foundation and museum. I think it's a gift shop, Drip Glass.
Yeah, I think we know what's in the gift shop, Bluegal.
Yeah. Soap, candles, golf tees,
vodka,
and shoes.
Mm-hmm.
The network and its star anchor, George Stephanopoulos, also published a statement saying they regret remarks made about Mr. Trump during a televised interview with Nancy Mace in March.
Mm-hmm. Look, let me say this. If ABC News wants to pay the Professional Left $15 million, we will stop calling them capitulating assholes for 2 months.
2 months.
2 months. You get free.
We can be bought.
We can be rented. We can be rented.
$15 million for 2 months.
We will not say one bad word about ABC News for at least a couple of months for $15 million. We will. That's our solemn promise from us to you. So
we will only imply it that they're capitulating.
We will
assholes.
broadly imply it. We might do caricatures about an organization called FlayBC News or ABK News or whatever it is.
George Snuffleupagus.
Snuffleupagus. Sure. There's a lot of alternatives. We're creative people, but for $15 million.
ABC News, which is owned by the Walt Disney Company, will pay Mr. Trump an additional $1 million for his legal fees. Did they donate that to the inaugural committee?
You know all those cartoons from the 50s and 40s of a mouse scaring a woman and having the woman jump up on a table and scream? Yeah. Now the mouse is up on the table screaming because this lard-ass traitor is threatening to sue them.
Yeah.
What a bunch of fucking cowards.
Now here's why they're such fucking cowards. The outcome is an unusual win for Mr. Trump, who has frequently sued news organizations for defamation and frequently lost, including in litigation against CNN, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Several experts in media law say they believe that ABC News could have continued to fight given the high threshold required by the courts for a public figure like Mr. Trump to prove defamation. A plaintiff must not only show that a news outlet published false information, but that it did so knowing that the information was false or with substantial doubts about its accuracy. I know we're interrupting this New York Times story a lot with comments, but if I was running ABC News, we would mention this constantly.
Oh, yeah.
Donald Trump is an adjudicated rapist, according to the courts, and he is suing us because George Stephanopoulos slightly misspoke.
Right.
And according to media law, his case is bullshit.
His case is as garbage as he is.
Yeah. Moving on. Quote, major news organizations have often been very leery of settlements in defamation suits brought by public officials and public figures, both because they fear the dangerous pattern of doing so and because they have the full weight of the First Amendment on their side, said Ronneal Anderson-Jones, a professor of law at the University of Utah. What we might be seeing here is an attitudinal shift, she added. Compared to the mainstream American press of a decade ago, today's press is far less financially robust, far more politically threatened, and exponentially less confident that a given jury will value press freedom rather than embrace a vilification of it. Unquote. Yeah, what has changed? Maybe all of it being owned by one corporation or three corporations has changed.
Yeah. And maybe one of the largest news corporations in America, certainly the largest contiguous ecosystem in America, the conservative media calling the press the enemy of the people for a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades.
Right.
We on the left have been critiquing the liberal media, quote unquote, for decades. I run a feature called Sunday Morning Coming Down. I've been doing that for 20 years. You've been doing it for 22 years or 21 years. We have been observing the failure of the media for a long time. But it's the exact opposite of this. They have not been unfair to Republicans. They have not been slighting Republicans or slamming Republicans. They have been bending over backwards and spreading both cheeks to accommodate Republican liars. Chuck Todd went on a radio broadcast that I reported on, like 10 years ago, where he...
Yeah, we ran it on our podcast, too.
We did.
Yeah.
And he said, well, here's the thing. And I'm paraphrasing this. I know they're crazy. If someone comes on my show and I know they're crazy or they're lying, I don't tell people about that because then they won't come back on my show. Right. You know? So I let them say whatever the fuck they want to say. I don't correct them. I don't attack them. I don't push back because if I did, I know they're crazy, but the audience, that's basically your problem.
And the only person that can push back on that and say, what does that do to your credibility is Lewis Black.
Right.
Who then says, well, yeah, but you're a comedian, so you can push back on it.
I can't do it.
Right.
But we have been critiquing the media forever. And so here we are with them now being sued in court by the bad guys, by the people that they have been sucking up to and bending over for decades, which is just, astonishing. So that anyone who was surprised that ABC would fold so hard and so fast obviously hasn't been paying attention to how corporate news has been behaving for the past 20 or 30 years. Remember, 15 years ago, it was Cokie Roberts and Peggy Noonan manning the Republican barricades on ABC's Sunday show, that very same show that George Stephanopoulos runs, arguing that we should all sort of, agree to forget that the Bush administration, tortured people, that we should all walk on by because some of life should remain mysterious.
Oh, I have reservations about all this. It's hard for me to look at a great nation issuing these documents and sending them out to the world and thinking, oh, much good will come of that. Sometimes in life you want to just keep walking. History has changed. It does change. We have a new administration, a new way. Sometimes I think just keep walking. Don't always be issuing papers and reports.
Be held accountable. Let people walk who may have committed a crime. I don't know if they did or not. But stop it.
But stop the techniques. I mean, anybody.
Some of life has to be mysterious.
Well, that's
not the right word.
I mean,
you know what I mean. It's not good to send out manuals to these people.
Any child of ours or whatever, to have their fingernails pulled out. Anything. I mean, there's nothing that you can think of that would be bad enough for someone in that situation if it worked. I just don't think it works.
But if people know they're going to get a pass at the end of the day on Peggy's view, which, all right, let's move forward. If you know that's going to be the view, well, then you do whatever you want.
And also, aren't there different kinds of accountability? Maybe it may be going a step far to have policymakers prosecuted in a court of law, although there are foreign courts who might be willing to do it. Yeah. But isn't it also, doesn't it help our democracy if we do expose it and hold people accountable in different ways?
Particularly because the lawyering that produced the memos flows from a theory subscribed to by very intelligent people called the unitary theory of the president. These are presidentialists, not only in the sense that they believe that the presidency ought to be very powerful, but they have a unitary theory, which is that...
Where in the Constitution do you find that?
These are intelligent... Well, I happen to think it's not there. You think that, but these are intelligent...
Well, I read English.
These are
not there.
Article 1.
Are intelligent men and women of goodwill who say that anything that inhibits the president's power to defend the country is not binding.
And if the president does it, it's legal.
And you know what? Some liberals, especially those of us who pay attention to the media, we blew our stacks, but nobody got fired. Nobody listened to us. Nobody got demoted. Nobody missed a meal. Peggy fucking Noonan went right on working for the Wall Street Journal, lying her ass off on their editorial page, popping up on the Sunday shows, and apparently remaining just shy of Pete Hegseth level of being hammered most of the time. And we assume George Will had cocktails with John Yoo and other torture pimps at various very smart people convocations. Now, 8 years ago, remember that was 15 years ago, that ABC News, the very same show that George Stephanopoulos was running then as is now, let these people get away with this shit. 8 years ago, ABC News chief political analyst was a guy named Matthew Dowd. And he was making a meal out of being Mr. Both Sides Dude on TV and in various other venues and on social media. He was Mr. Corrupt Duopoly. Both sides are terrible. The effect of what he did was to raise Donald Trump's profile and credibility and lower Hillary Clinton's on purpose to make them equal. They were equally bad. They were equally terrible. This gave Trump a huge advantage, a massive advantage, because Hillary Clinton was a competent public servant. And Donald Trump was and is a lying, racist scumbag.
She might have been a little too overprepared, Driftglass.
Could have been overprepared. You don't know. That was
overqualified. She might have been too qualified to be president.
That was certainly
Chuck
Todd's
careful
opinion.
about that.
We need to be careful. And as you all know, Matthew Dowd in public on social media attacked my readers, attacked me, called us stupid, called us foolish.
Thank God he deleted his entire Twitter stream from prior to 2016. Driftglass.
No, he's deleted almost all of it up until like 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And he blocked anyone who mentions it. But the point being that there is no punishment for people like this. Matthew Dowd effectively accommodated Donald Trump by making him equivalent to Hillary Clinton and urging people to piss their votes away by voting third party or independent, not voting at all, because that'll teach the corrupt duopoly a lesson, because we need disruption, Bluegal.
And for his sins, Driftglass, this is from Deadline, February 2nd, 2022. Quote, Matthew Dowd has joined MSNBC as political contributor and analyst in a role that will include field reporting about the threats to U.S. democracy.
Yeah.
Dowd, a former political strategist for George W. Bush, last month ended his campaign for lieutenant governor of Texas. Mm-hmm. He previously was a longtime political analyst for ABC News and had one of the Kennedy women as a mistress, apparently.
Yes, he did.
Joining the network in 2007 and departing last year, he made his first appearance in his new MSNBC role on Wednesday's Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace. That's his old pal from the Bush days.
It is. Nicole Wallace had been in the business at that point of rehabilitating Republicans, and they were going strong. And all Dowd had to do was destroy all of the evidence, wipe out all the tweets, block anyone who talked about the past, and hang out with Nicole Wallace and have his whole career whitewashed. And suddenly he's the defender of democracy. And what are all these both sides do it assholes talking about why are both sides? That's such a terribly irresponsible thing to do. The point being, these are just two examples that I pulled for this particular episode from 20 years of my very own Sunday morning coming down archives of these Sunday shows capitulating to and normalizing Republican assholes in large ways and small, and never paying a price for it. Never once paying a price for it. Even though everyone knows what comes from appeasing lunatics, liars, and fascists.
You know, you got to stop them at the beginning. Like they should have stopped Hitler at Munich. They should never let him get away with that. They was just the icing for big trouble.
They did it anyway, because it was corporate policy. So why would anyone be surprised that ABC folded to Trump this week? Why would anyone be surprised that pretty much every other major American news outlet remained conspicuously silent about it?
And now that the fascists smell blood in the water, expect a lot more of this to come. From The Guardian, quote, Trump allies float extreme ideas. Say extreme one more goddamn time. Including Trump third term at gala. Radical suggestions came from Steve Bannon and indicate most polarizing proposals will be up for consideration. Yeah, by the way, Steve Bannon thinks he runs the Trump world. And it may be true. It's hard to say at this point, but he may very well run it. Donald Trump's allies have become increasingly emboldened to float their most audacious ideas as Trump prepares to return to office, suggesting he run for an unconstitutional third term in 2028, and accusing the news media of having engaged in a criminal conspiracy with prosecutors against him. Those suggestions by Trump's former strategist, Steve Bannon, came at a self-congratulatory gala dinner for conservatives in New York on Sunday. At times, the remarks seemed like the product of the euphoria that permeated the audience. We want retribution, and we're going to get retribution. You have to. It's not personal. It's not personal, Bannon said to the raucous room. They need to learn they need to learn what populist nationalist power is on the receiving end. I need investigations, trials, and then incarceration. And I'm just talking about the media. Should the media be included in the vast criminal conspiracy against President Trump? Should Andrew Weissman on MSNBC and Rachel Maddow and all of them? We want all your emails, all your text messages, everything you did. You colluded in a conspiracy with Merrick Garland, Nancy Pelosi, Lisa Monaco, and Jack Smith. Bannon said, name-checking the Attorney General, former Democratic House Speaker, the Deputy Attorney General, and the Trump Special Counsel. Unquote.
Yep, they got plans. Meanwhile, as the legacy media was busy very publicly scrambling to flatter and accommodate the incoming fascist regime, a very big lie that helped that fascist regime get elected in the first place fell apart, and almost no one noticed. This is from CNN's Reliable Source newsletter, quote, Biden bombshell falls flat. Marshall Cohen writes, disgraced ex-FBI informant Alexander Smirnov pleaded guilty Monday to falsely accusing Joe and Hunter Biden of taking bribes from Ukraine. Uh-oh. This is notable partly because the GOP lawmakers and right-wing outlets championed Smirnov's claim to bolster their ill-fated impeachment push against Biden. Fox host called Smirnov extremely trustworthy and said his bombshell allegations might be the biggest story of the year. Smirnov is now admitted in court that he made it all up. That's the real bombshell. But with the Trump transition in full swing, this development captured little media attention on Monday. Pleading guilty obviously won't and can't undo the real political impact of Smirnov's lies, which hurt Biden and benefited Trump, who is now headed back to the White House. Yes, this guilty plea finally closes the loop on what was true and what was false, but if a liar admits that he lies and no one is listening, does it even matter? Unquote.
Yep. I'll give you guys a little hint that is exclusive to the Professional Life podcast.
Ooh.
We have at Crookies and Liars the Crookie Awards, where we do the worst people of the year. We do some good guy awards as well, but we do the Crookies. Mm-hmm. And I promise you that Alexander Smirnov is going to be very high up in the Crookie Awards this year. We're going to
give shortlisted
as much attention as we possibly can. Yes.
Yeah. Well, but that's the point. The outlets like Crooks and Liars will focus on this, have focused on this. It's not like the story isn't happening anywhere. It's that
it is the keystone to the whole Biden crime family story that Sean Hannity has been and James Comer have been masturbating to for how many years?
Yep. And it's all
Burisma,
it's all lie. It's all lie. And it'll just disappear. It'll just vanish because there is no legacy media left that's willing to put their ass on the line and make this a story and make it a story every fucking day the way they did with Hillary Clinton's emails.
And like Hillary Clinton's emails was a story every day in the New York Times over and over again. Yes. And I think it is in part that. But I think the fault also lies with ourselves in that there is no energy in our brains, I guess, to revisit any traumas. Ever. Mm-hmm. I think about 2,000 Mules, which has now been completely discredited, and Dinesh D'Souza has apologized so he doesn't get sued. Mm-hmm. He had bad information, Drifkus. He was given bad information.
Someone else's fault. It was definitely someone else's fault.
But the damage, the number of people you and I know who will swear on a Bible that liberals were stuffing ballot boxes is forever. It's burned in their brains because they went to see that movie at the theater because Dinesh D'Souza is a truth teller.
And this is what people like Steve Bannon understand.
Yes.
That once you blow shit up, afterwards you can say, oops, shouldn't have done that. But the rubble is still the rubble.
The rubble is the rubble forever. Yeah. And it's in people's heads.
People around here in this town still believe that Hillary Clinton assassinated Vince Foster.
Yep.
and will tell you to your face, and that with just like
that Bill Clinton was a cocaine dealer. Yeah.
And it will tell you that with the same level of credibility, with the same level of just calmness, that they'll talk about the price of oranges. It's just a fact in their universe, and nothing will dislodge them, which is why trying to persuade these people, trying to coax them back to the light of reason is a fool's errand. It can't be done. So stop it. Stop it. There are a bunch of people out there who are uncommitted, who are just lazy or bored or exhausted. Those are the people you go after. And I'm sorry, but a liberal media like the coastal podcasts that are very, very, very big are necessary, and that's great, but they only talk to liberals.
Yeah.
There's nobody out there penetrating into any place other than people who already agree with them. And so all of this wish casting of a liberal media, well, what you mean is a liberal media that will reach as many people as Walter Cronkite reached across all spectra. And that's a vain hope. So when people start talking about what Democrats gotta do, what liberals gotta do, ask them, what megaphone will they have? All roads, I swear to you, all roads, I've noticed this for years, all roads lead to, and then liberal billionaires build us a mighty Wurlitzer of our own. Every plan ends with that. So I'm asking all of you smart people out there, subtract that from the equation. If no liberal billionaire is going to show up and make us a liberal media that's loud enough to force the Overton window to the left a little bit, then what? What do we do then? Because that's the situation that we're actually faced with.
This is a side story, something that broke today and was all over social media, and I wanted to address it, although you've heard me on this soapbox more than once if you're a regular listener of this podcast. This morning, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez lost the House race for office of ranking member of the House Oversight Committee to 74-year-old Jerry Connolly, 131 to 84. Not mentioned in the AOC Connolly election results is my frequent contention that House rock stars do not belong in boring administrative positions. I'm not engaging in the battle for AOC for oversight ranking member because chairing that committee eventually means attaching Robert's Rules of Order at the hip and, most importantly, keeping other Democrats on that committee happy. Which is an awful job. Ranking member of the House Oversight Committee is an administrative position. And people saying, well, yeah, but it's such a great microphone. AOC doesn't need more microphones. And ranking member doesn't give her a more special microphone. And I want to contrast her and her messaging, particularly on healthcare in the past 2 weeks, which has been excellent, talking about how much violence is done by denying people medical claims.
Yep.
That is an act of violence against people who are dying or sick. And compare that to Hakeem Jeffries on CoBear, who was dreadful. He just gave Pelosi talking points, and CoBear called him out and said, yeah, but that's just a speech you wrote. And he had to snap out of, and he really couldn't. Because he's good at personnel.
He's really good at the thing he's good at.
Yeah. He's good. He's good at putting rock stars on committees where they'll get on television and make an impact. And I'm not saying AOC doesn't make an impact in committees. She always does. But she doesn't need to be sorting papers and figuring out where people sit and trying to make a lot of egos in the Democratic Party happy with her position. Because the point of ranking member is then when Democrats take over the House, she's chairman. And that job is a huge headache.
Yeah.
It's not all, let's call out the bad people on TV. It's administrative. So, dear professional left listeners, don't die on this hill. AOC, in my opinion, should be barnstorming the country on behalf of younger candidates for the House of Representatives. not sitting in committee, citing Robert's rules, and trying and failing to keep her caucus members happy as chairman in that administrative position. And again, it's irksome to me to watch social media Democrats treat members of Congress like their own personal Lego figures. For instance, I love him, so put him as king of the castle. Make Elizabeth Warren a Democratic majority leader in the Senate.
No.
That's a waste of her talent. This is not fantasy league football. It's a job. And AOC's talents, of which she has massive talent, should not be wasted sorting papers and egos. And that does not mean that I am in favor of, this gerontocracy that we have.
No, exactly.
In American politics. It's got to go. We need people who are younger than baby boomers running things. I've said many times, as big a problem as people had with Obama being black, the other problem they had was he was younger than they were.
Right. And that reminds you that you're going to die. You're
old and you're going to die. The president should always be older than me. That's why the past two presidents have been older than anybody. Is boomers can't stand it. They can't stand the president being younger than they are. That's a reminder of their mortality.
Right. Exactly.
And they got to get over that, either by getting over it or dying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I just want to add one more thing, which you mentioned earlier, and I forgot to include in our outline, which is all hail Jared Moscowitz for not taking the job that he was offered.
Yeah.
For saying,
and he also admitted that he was not offered the job.
Right.
But
he said, said, thank you, but fuck you. I'm not leaving this job. There's a guy that you want in the front lines, just blasting away, away all day long.
As we mentioned last week, he thanked the Lord that Jamie Comer is still chairman of the House Oversight Committee.
That's the right energy. Yep.
That's where he belongs, is making life miserable.
Yeah.
Through Robert's Rules of Order.
Exactly.
He knows when he gets a chance to speak. He knows how to take advantage of that and do point of order and point of information and interrupt the chair when it's in an appropriate way that boxes him in, boxes Jamie Comer in. He can't ignore it. If somebody says point of order, something's out of order here, and they have something that's, you can't abuse that, but something is out of order, that committee activity stops at that point. I know this. Model legislature, right? 1976.
Hey, Student Congress right here. Student Congress right here.
But I graduated from high school in 1981. So 80 or 81, I was outstanding representative in the Pennsylvania Model Legislature.
Well, okay. See, when I was in Student Congress, because debate, speech, the Student Congress all kind of ran together, we impeached the Speaker of the House and for fun, and then we restored her to power just for fun.
Oh, that was fun. Just for
because
fun.
It was just exercising, but it was reading. It really was. You read bills, you marked them up in a hotel room or a cold classroom on a Saturday morning.
Everybody brought their bill to the right.
And you compromised, and it was good practice. But Jared Moscowitz is really good at sitting right there in the front row.
In his Smurf suit.
Lobbing grenades. He's really good at that. And that's what he should be doing. More of that, please.
Yep.
I do want to mention.
So, yes, we're going to have a Royco story by Driftglass on Thursday.
We will.
And I hear that it's explicitly a science fiction story and that you have promised us this.
I have, and I will. That might be the extent of our podcast. Because we're nearing the holiday
down
time.
For the holidays, and we have learned a thing or two from 14 years at this.
Cool.
What?
Coming up on 15.
We might take 15. Coming up on 15.
Yep.
That's
this
right.
January.
15 in January. 15 in January.
Yep.
That it's not going to be a full slate of podcasts next week.
No. There's going to be a lot of
knitting podcasts next week. I'm putting my foot down.
Yeah. Your knit sock clad foot down.
Yes, my knit sock clad foot down.
So yes, that's a Driftglass promise from me to you that the next time you hear a Royco story on this podcast, it will be a science fiction story.
All right. That's going to be on
promise.
Thursday.
See,
We
is
are
that
going to
enough
do
of
a show on Thursday.
Is that enough of a tease? Are we teasing that? Is it sufficient to
so.
interest you, pique your and those of you out there who have a Chicago background, can you guess what story I'm talking about?
Email driftglass99@gmail.com and let him know.
Yeah. What Royco story could I possibly be talking about that is explicitly a science fiction story?
All right, let's do a news roundup, Driftglass. Yeah. The cornfield resistance persists. Trump downplayed concerns that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is picked to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, and also apparently a heroin addict for 15 years who had a brain worm. And a bunch of other things. Good at phone sex, I guess, or something. He will revoke the polio vaccine despite reports that RFK Jr.'s personal attorney previously lobbied the FDA to suspend its approval of the polio vaccine.
Yeah. Yeah, promising people that your nominee won't do the thing that he has promised to do and wants to do and his attorney wants to do is, I mean, I always have to remind myself, MAGA voters are incredibly stupid and short-sighted and don't listen to any of this. They're not aware of any of this. So he's saying these things to mollify the press. That's all he's doing. Speaking of mollifying the press and people who are bending over, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and Sam Altman each donated $1 million to Trump's inaugural fund.
Their sofa cushion money. That's what they're getting.
It's sofa. The gap between working class and wealth, where $1 million is just sofa cushion to these people, is you really have to be a very creative writer to imagine what life must be like when you can build rocket ships because you have a whim that you want to fly rocket ships. Apple CEO Tim Cook, also known as Tim Apple, meanwhile had dinner with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, while Google CEO Sundar Pichai will meet with Trump at Mar-a-Lago later this week. Trump previously claimed that Google was rigged to hide positive coverage about him, which was also, of course, a big fat lie.
Trump's transition team has outlined plans to roll back Biden's electric vehicle and emissions policies, including cutting EV subsidies, imposing tariffs on battery materials, and loosening pollution standards. Because he loves pollution.
Yes, he does.
That plus his promise to drill it all and burn it all might come as a shock to all the stupids out there who voted for Trump because they believed RFK Jr. would be good for the environment, in particular air pollution.
Yeah. I heard
they remember him from the 1980s.
I heard these people on various focus groups. Like, yeah, Trump's awful. He's terrible. He's a monster. But RFK, I know him from the 80s and 90s, and he was really good in the environment. So I think he'll be good for the environment. Like, really? Because is RFK, do you think RFK will be ordering Trump around, telling him what to do? Do you think he's going to last 11 minutes until Trump Twitter fires him once he crosses him? I mean, come on, people.
Right.
But remember, you got to remember, these people are really, really stupid. And my favorite story this week from NPR, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, a longtime theater lover, made her Broadway debut. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson made her Broadway debut this weekend. She also made history as the first member of the nation's highest court to grace its storied stage, according to the production that invited her. Jackson appeared in a one-night-only walk-on role on Saturday night in the Tony-nominated romantic comedy musical And Juliet, a modern take on Shakespeare's tragedy that imagines what would have happened if the female protagonist survived and took control of her own life, unquote. And then the right lost its fucking mind because
as they always do.
The sanctity and augustness of the court had been permanently damaged.
Sullied.
By Clarence Thomas taking, not the bribes, not the racism, not the Alito shit, not the drunkenness, not all the lying under oath and all the perjury that those people put themselves through to get on the court so they can get rid of Roe versus Wade. None of that was the problem.
None of that. No.
It's that this wonderful, competent, qualified justice took one night out to appear on stage and make a dream come true for herself. That was a bridge too far. One night.
Feel free to write to both of us at proleftpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write to us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions here and in Canada. Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. Don't forget that we are getting ready to mail out Christmas cards. If you would like a Christmas card from us, please mail us one.
Yes.
And we have a stack. We've gotten them. They're beautiful cards. Thank you so much, you guys. And we will put the address in the show notes again this week.
That's right. And it's working. The system is working.
The system is working. People that want a card will get a card. Yes.
Yeah. And people who don't or don't want to be bothered, we won't bother you. We'll just, we'll think loving thoughts about you when you're not looking.
Yes.
Also, don't forget our gourmet coffee guidelines. You know them by heart by now. Do I need to repeat myself? Apparently I do. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for us, buy yourself one as well. Ha ha. See what I did? I reversed that.
See
Clever
what you
me.
did there.
This is not a job. It's a charity. No, I reversed that too. Sorry. It's goofy and I feel kind of the holiday spirit. But basically, if you can spare $5 a month, please spare $5 a month at patreon.com/proleftpod. Also, please share our show on social media. We grow organically by your mentions and your approvals and your likes. So if you love this podcast, please get someone else to listen to. And thank you so much for doing that.
And we have had a couple of $5 new Patreons this week who said, I'm finally meeting my New Year's resolution to support progressive media.
Yeah.
And we are grateful that you think we're worthy because we are.
Yeah, we're not holding out for billionaires to come to rescue us.
No, we're not.
This is what we're going to keep doing because this is what needs to be done.
This is what needs to be done. Absolutely. Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Well, Bluegal, the Internet Kitties have suggested that, like the very big podcasts, we should take time at the end of our show to thank all the people who have made this show possible over the past year. So, shout out to our producers, Bluegal and Driftglass. Associate producers, Bluegal and Driftglass. Executive producers of news and politics, Bluegal and Driftglass. Executive producers covering the media, Bluegal and Driftglass. Executive editors of news and politics, that'd be Bluegal and Driftglass. Executive editors of the Professional Left's media coverage, Driftglass and Bluegal. Audio mixer and editor, Bluegal. Sound engineer, Bluegal. Best in the business, Bluegal. Writing support, Driftglass. Audio support would be by Bosco. Head of news and programming, that'd be Driftglass. Head of production, Bluegal. Executive assistant, Olive the Cat. Digital and social media team, Bluegal, Driftglass, Olive, Brock, and Bosco. And social media team, Bluegal, Driftglass, Olive, Brock, and Bosco. And of course, listeners like you.
Let's think about living. Think about living. Let's think about loving. Think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the loving, lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with the switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2024-25, GGBG Productions.